Hello, I'm Esther Githu. Welcome to Africa 54 special coverage of the United States presidential election. We'll have live reports, analysis and reaction on Republican Donald Trump winning the White House for a second time. The American voters have spoken. Republican Donald Trump has defeated Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris to win a second term as President of the United States. VOA senior Washington correspondent Caroline Presutti was at the election night celebration in Florida, where Trump claimed victory.
The next president of the United States is a familiar one.
So I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
Former President Donald Trump waited more than 7 hours after the polls closed on the East Coast to address his followers.
It's time to put the divisions of the past 4 years behind us. It's time to unite.
Supporters were always confident, despite polls showing a razor-thin difference between Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris.
I think a lot of people are just tired of what's going on in the country. Just everything's up. Food, fuel, housing.
I like the 4 years we had under Trump prior, and I'm hoping we can get back to that.
After Trump achieved the required 270 electoral votes, the red wave continued in the U.S. Senate as the Republicans took the majority. It's been a brutally long campaign, with Trump surviving 2 assassination attempts. A bullet in July grazed his ear, leaving an iconic image of the presidential candidate mouthing, "Fight, fight, fight." Renee White was sitting behind him that day in Butler, Pennsylvania, and she was in West Palm Beach election night. She says Trump needs to keep that attitude these next 4 years.
I don't think it's going to be easy. You have to keep fighting.
It's almost as if this crowd knew from the beginning that their man would win again. These are the hats that were given out as people walked into this election night party. On the back, Trump, with 45 and 47 written on the side. Caroline Presutti, VOA News, West Palm Beach, Florida.
Let's go now to VOA White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara, who was at Howard University here in Washington, where Vice President Kamala Harris watched the disappointing results come in. Hello, Patsy. Tell us about the mood at the Howard University watch party.
Yeah, so last night at around about 15 minutes past midnight, campaign co-chair Cedric Richmond came on stage and announced that people to go home, and Kamala Harris will not be addressing supporters until tomorrow, which is today. And the expectation is that she will deliver remarks later on this afternoon. It will be the expectation is that it will be her concession speech, because she has committed before that she will support the results of the election. And the mood itself last night at the Harris campaign headquarters watch party, at around about 10 o'clock, I think the mood started to turn. 10:30, started to get more dark, more somber, as more and more states were called for Trump. People, were definitely dancing less, laughing less, and we can just feel the mood starting to get darker and darker at around about 10 p.m. until people were told to go home and crowds start to thin out at around midnight.
Patsy, now we know where things stand, and how quickly then do preparations begin for the incoming president?
Well, we don't even have a president-elect yet, because technically that's not going to happen until all the results are counted and certified. But of course, you know that Trump himself has already declared himself as president-elect, and there will be a period of transition. Don't forget that inauguration is not until January, so we still have a couple of months to go to where Joe Biden is still the president and Donald Trump will not be president until January of 2025.
Patsy, you were at the White House during Trump's presidency from 2017 to 2021. What's likely to change during his second term when he comes to the office?
Well, many analysts are pointing out that in 2016, when Trump won, as he was the 45th president of the United States, many of his instincts were really curbed by professionals, old-time Republicans, chief of staffs, who are guarding him against the instinct that his critics say are too unpredictable, too isolationist, or too Trumpy, essentially. I think this time what will be different is that Trump will surround himself with people who are much more aligned to him, whether it's ideologically or just in terms of supporting his agenda. So no doubt that this is a very strong movement towards the right in American politics, in American ideological policy in the White House. How that will turn out, we don't know. I mean, we can only tell from what Trump has promised himself. I mean, he has promised a lot of things. He has promised not only to reduce inflation, but he has actually promised deflation in essence, because he's saying that the prices will go down. And then he's also promised that he will end wars with just a phone call or within 24 hours, even though he has never explained how he will do that. Of course, there are a lot of concerns from Democrats, from progressives, from people who care about the environment, from people who care about issues of social welfare and so on. Abortion is also another big concern in terms of reproductive rights. So many of those things will be a reckoning for Democrats.
Patsy, many thanks for your reporting. VOA White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara live for us there. VOA's Tina Trinh explores how President-elect Donald Trump's past policies and current positions offer insight into his upcoming presidency.
It's official. 78-year-old Donald J. Trump, the former U.S. president, will once again occupy the White House as President of the United States. Like Grover Cleveland in the late 1800s, Trump will serve 2 non-consecutive terms in office as the 45th and the 47th U.S. president. To understand how a second Trump presidency could play out, it helps to look back at his first term in office and recent claims on the campaign trail. Immigration is a major theme for Trump, and his restrictive policies are tied to his nationalist America First views. Back in 2017, 7 days after he was sworn in, Trump imposed a 90-day travel ban, barring citizens of 7 Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S.
I'm establishing new vetting measures to keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the United States of America. We don't want them here.
During this year's presidential campaign, Trump spoke forcefully about what he calls a migrant invasion, making border security a key electoral issue. He told supporters in North Carolina what he would say to Mexico's new president.
I'm going to inform her on day 1 or sooner that if they don't stop this onslaught of criminals and drugs coming into our country, I'm going to immediately impose a 25% tariff on everything they send in to the United States of America.
During his presidency, Trump imposed tariffs on Chinese imports and seems unlikely to change tactics this time around.
They've really been hurting us. It's so ridiculous. They end up closing, everybody loses their job, then they make it in their country, and then they send it back to us with no tax, no nothing. And we lose the company, we lose the jobs, we lose sort of everything, and it's so stupid.
Trump pulled the U.S. out of the 2015 Paris Agreement, an international treaty tackling climate change, global warming, and greenhouse gas emissions.
I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris.
Trump says his energy policy will focus on increased domestic oil production and a rollback of environmental regulations.
We're going to, first day, first hour, we can do many things in the first, but first, we're going to drill, baby, drill.
In his second term as president, Trump is promising a more protectionist and isolationist approach than the last 4 years of President Joe Biden. Tina Trinh, VOA News, New York.
A state of Georgia supporter of President-elect Trump, Nelson McDonald, says he is looking forward to a more conservative future for America.
I think the change, hopefully the pendulum has swung as far toward liberalism as people can tolerate, and they recognize that it's not been successful, and it's going to swing back to either a moderate or a conservative position, that family values and really traditional values are embraced again.
Trump supporter Nelson McDonald expressing his views on the future of America. VOA's Anthony Labruto is in the southern U.S. state of Georgia. Anthony, Georgia was blue for Biden in 2020, but President-elect Donald Trump won the state, turning it red. How did that happen?
Hi, Esther. Yes, so it was a little bit of a dramatic night, a little bit of almost a photo finish here in Georgia, especially in Cobb County. Votes were being counted well up until about 2 a.m., a little bit further, although this VOA had already called the state of Georgia. But it has been certainly a long path to victory for Donald Trump here in Georgia. He has won the state by 2 percentage points now, which really blew away that 0.2 of a percentage point that Joe Biden won it in 2020. So definitely a very, very surprising margin of victory for the now president-elect.
What would you say, talking to voters there, that was probably the key thing that actually brought them to the polls?
It really was an interesting conversation with both supporters of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Their messaging had been, Kamala Harris's had been abortion and reproductive rights. Trump's had been the economy and immigration. And as you heard with Nelson McDonald, the voters in Georgia really wanted to elect a president that would really bring back the conservative, the family values that they had expressed for so long over the course before Georgia became really that competitive swing state. So it's interesting to see how much of that Republican Party really came out, really united behind the former president to give him really a surprisingly large margin of victory here.
And Anthony, what are you hearing from Georgians there about the victory of Trump? What does it change for that state?
Certainly, it'll be interesting to see where voters in Georgia will see a lot of Trump's policies really being reflected. I think a lot of things that I had heard from Trump voters were really the economy, immigration, really a lot of these issues that, as one voter put it, that they can sit down at a kitchen table and talk about and really feel as middle-class Americans here in a swing county in particular, at least in metropolitan Atlanta. This really has been one of the more swing districts, swing portions of the state. So I think voters really were interested in kind of being persuaded from the two sides as to what each candidate was going to do really for them, their own homes, and their children, and so on.
Great job. Thanks very much, Anthony. Anthony Labruto, live for us from Marietta, Georgia. VOA's Philip Alexio spoke to people here in Washington, D.C. about the presidential election results.
I'm not upset or anything. I'm not happy. I'm not upset or anything like that. At the end of the day, everyone still got a job to do. Life goes on, so can't stop. Got to keep going. So that's pretty much my thoughts on it. I'm not disappointed at the outcome, and I never think things are going to be okay. So, especially when it comes to presidents and just politics in general, one thing that politics have shown us that things are never going to be, okay, or things may look one way, but it's really another way. So,
I'm really worried about Donald Trump winning the election. I think he flirts with tyranny a lot, and so I'm worried about what that's going to usher for the United States.
Now, why do you say that?
He said he was going to be a dictator on day one, and I know that J.D. Vance, he has said a lot of things about Ukraine too, that he is not a fan of how the war is going, and I'm afraid that they don't understand the consequences of what they're saying.
I have mixed feelings about it. I think I would have liked to have different options. So I had a very hard time making a decision with this election. I believe that God is on his throne. And as long as God is on his throne, which will always be true, then I think everything ultimately will be okay. But in the meantime, we might have some rocky roads.
My personal thoughts, let the country still keep running, let American people still do what they need to do so we can stay together and keep the country running. That's my views on it. We make this country, and we have to keep working together to make the country run.
Very disappointed in the direction of the country. Apparently a lot of people feel that way, but for me, the direction we're about to take is going to make things quite dark and a lot worse for my kids.
Why do you say that?
I don't think that we're going to have a president who my kids can admire. He has very little concern for the needs of other people and is mainly interested in himself. And that shows in his policies as well.
So I'm neutral when it comes to politics, yeah, so I didn't really vote in this election.
So do you follow it at all?
I do, just to see what the outcome is going to be. You know.
And would it have mattered to you if one or the other had won? Did it matter in a way?
Not really, because I'm a person who reads the Bible, and so the Bible helps us to appreciate that whoever wins, they really can't answer the problems of mankind. The Bible says that only one king can actually do that, and that's Jesus Christ. He can solve the problems that face mankind.
Results, I'm a man of faith, so I just trust in God. I mean, God knows what's best, even when man doesn't. So if God chose who he chose to win this race, then I believe God has a purpose for it. And I just believe in whatever he's going to do to whoever is president.
People on the streets of Washington, D.C. talking about the presidential election results. President-elect Donald Trump's margin of victory contradicted the many polls that had predicted a tight race. However, speaking on VOA's Straight Talk Africa program Wednesday, Ambassador J. Peter Pham, Atlantic Council Fellow at the Africa Center and a former Special Envoy for the Sahel and Great Lakes regions of Africa, says he is not surprised by the election results.
I'm very delighted at the results, and I'm not surprised because President Trump had a message which echoed with the American people quite clearly. He's become the first Republican in 20 years to not only win, we're still counting votes, the Electoral College, but also the popular vote, currently leading Vice President Harris by 5 million votes nationally. So I think the message of the economy, as the correspondent mentioned earlier, but also immigration, border security, national security, peace through strength, and not being rolled up. So all those things, I think, were powerful messages. And he built a new coalition. This is not your grandfather or even your father's Republican Party. The exit polling from pointed to a coalition that now includes groups that formerly were not part of the Republican coalition. So we're seeing a realignment also of U.S. domestic politics that will be important as an influence on our foreign policy.
That was Ambassador J. Peter Pham speaking Wednesday on VOA's Straight Talk Africa program. Be sure to watch the entire Straight Talk Africa broadcast coming up on VOA in about 90 minutes. Now, for more on the U.S. presidential election, I'm joined live from here in Washington by Professor Kwaku Nwoama from the School of International Service at American University. Professor Nwoama, American voters were constantly told that Harris had a slight lead against Trump and in opinion polls, but he appears to have won by a wide margin. How did he pull this off?
Well, Esther, polls can always be misleading, especially when it comes to minority candidates. You know, in social science, there's the Bradley effect, named for the former mayor of Los Angeles, Tom Bradley, who ran for governor, and he was ahead in the polls, but he ended up losing to his white competitor. And the suggestion is that when you poll people about whether they're going to vote for a black candidate, they usually lie because they usually worried that you might think that they're racist. So polls are usually inaccurate when it comes to minority candidates. And also, there are people who look at the presidency as an anthropological job. They're not selecting somebody who's best for the economy. They're selecting somebody who's the leader of the tribe. And so if you are not the person that fits that profile, they may vote against you. So when Jack Kennedy, for example, ran for president as the first Catholic, he had to give a speech saying he wasn't going to take orders from the Pope. Barack Obama had to give a speech, denouncing his black pastor. And Kamala Harris didn't have time to do all that stuff. Remember, she only had 4 months to run for president. She ended up with 66 million votes. So she did very well, but she didn't have the time to, define herself, to assuage all the fears that other people have. The things that they don't tell pollsters.
All right,
because
Paul,
they are afraid might think
let's move on to Africa, because there are a lot of people wondering, okay, Trump is in. What's likely to be his policy for the continent?
Well, so Biden was going to push for Africa to have representation, permanent seats in the U.S. Security Council. I don't think Trump is going to do that. There are a number of things that are coming, Africa-specific things that is going to land on his desk. So the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, for example, is about to be renewed. He's probably not going to do it because he's pushing for tariffs, and that bill will give Africa tariff-free access to American markets. He's not going to do that. There is also protective status for Africans from about 5 countries who are allowed to stay here because there are wars in their country. He's probably not going to renew that. You also have the president's emergency plan for HIV/AIDS relief research. He's probably going to insist, Republicans will always do this, they're going to insist that there are abortion-related restrictions. So that's going to affect African service providers who rely on that. Then there's also the question of whether he's going to do his Muslim ban, which will affect a lot of African countries. So yeah, Africa will probably not fare very well in this administration, but anything can change.
Professor, he comes in at a time of war in the Middle East. There's the Russia-Ukraine war as well, and in Africa there's the war going on in Sudan. How do you think he's going to address these wars amid America's economic issues?
Well, different outcomes. So already in Israel, people on the right are celebrating because they expect that Trump will give them a free hand to do whatever they want to do. So they are very happy with that. Then you go to Ukraine. Remember, Ukraine is why he was impeached the first time. And I think that he hasn't forgiven the president of Ukraine for that. So he might cut funding for Ukraine. When it comes to Sudan, he actually did a deal with Sudan where Sudan recognized Israel in exchange for Trump lifting sanctions. So because he's transactional, he might be able to do something over there, but I don't think he cares enough about Sudan to actually use his political capital to push the peace process. But like I said, we don't really know because he's, erratic and he's also transactional, so his views may change.
Professor, as always, great insight. Kwaku Nuama is a professor at the School of International Service at American University. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll have an update on the U.S. congressional races. Stay with us.
This year's U.S. election is the most important election with a global impact. And here at VOA Africa, we're dedicated to delivering to you the latest news.
voaafrique.com pour une élection historique. Kamala Harris va faire face à
Donald Trump.
And Kamala Trump waxay aad hadda ugu noqonayaan gobolada la isku xiro immigration iyo jegtay.
Esta é uma eleição histórica nos Estados Unidos.
Lazima pia ugundua mwenzake wato electoral college.
From TV programs to radio broadcast and digital coverage, VOA Africa has been delivering accurate news and information. So stay with us for continued coverage of this country's historic election.
Control of the U.S. Congress is still in play. 435 seats are still up for grabs, but appears that the Republicans will take control. Republicans have already seized control of the Senate. They're looking to secure a conservative majority for the first time in 4 years. Democrats, however, did manage to hold on to a few contested seats. Now, for more on Congress, VOA's Paul Ndiho is standing by live on Capitol Hill. Hello, Paul. Republicans won big. They control the Senate now. What does this mean?
Thanks, Esther. What a remarkable comeback for President-elect Donald Trump and the Republican Party. For the first time in nearly 20 years, they won the popular vote and the Electoral College. Here on Capitol Hill, Republicans could not be more excited about what they are going to do with their newfound power.
Now, what challenges might arise if Democrats retain control of the House?
Well, it's going to be an uphill battle, but a lot remains to be seen since most of there's still some contentious issues that haven't been settled. Some seats haven't been called, so we will wait until that has been finalized. But as I can tell you, the last time President Trump was in office, he had a challenge trying to deal with Democrats because they could not just budge into whatever he wanted to do. So he's definitely going to have an uphill battle. But from the things that I'm looking at as of now, it looks like both houses could be taken on by the Republicans. So as we wait, we'll have to see what happens going forward.
Now, Paul, you know, would the Republican Party control of the Senate affect the confirmation, let's say, of the future Supreme Court nominees?
A great question, Esther. This is going to be certainly an interesting time. We have on the Supreme Court, we already have 6 conservative justices on the Supreme Court. This term could give President Trump an opportunity to appoint other conservative judges to the Supreme Court. Obviously, the country decided to go with him, so he's going to have a mandate to do whatever he wants to do. When you look at some of the things that were on the ballot, for example, abortion issues, most of these conservative judges on the Republican side did not want this to go forward. Luckily, now Trump has a chance to use his newfound power to push for more judges who are conservative, who align with his thoughts, who align with his direction, who want to take this country to a different place. So this is an opportunity for him maybe to do that.
And Paul, do you think there are some judges that are ready to call it, say, they're about to retire, and maybe that creates another opportunity for maybe 1 or 2 more?
You know, this is some kind of politics. There is always a game that is played around when it comes to judges, when they retire and when they should hang on to power. For example, there were some judges who were supposed to retire early, but they decided not to do that because they wanted to see who is going to win the White House. Now that President Trump has had this resounding victory, it might be possible that some of these Supreme Court judges who have been on the bench for the longest time might want to step down. Maybe just for perspective, here judges on the Supreme Court are appointed for life. So you still have a lot of judges who are young, but you have also a significant number of them who are relatively old, who might be retiring soon. So this is a perfect opportunity for them to do that.
Paul, I'm amazed about your understanding of America's politics. Paul Ndiho reporting live for us from Capitol Hill. And that's our special Africa 54 edition of the U.S. presidential election. For continuing coverage of President-elect Donald Trump's win, be sure to visit our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.